Hey guys, I'm here at GenCon 2016 at the Flying Buffalo booth, but it's an interesting situation going on here because David from MetaArcade is here as well, and they have partnered together to produce something really cool, a Tunnels and Trolls digitized version in an app. David, tell me all about this thing.
Absolutely. So a lot of people here might know that GenCon is where Flying Buffalo has been for 40 years now. The original publishers of Tunnels and Trolls. It was the second role-playing game ever published, right after Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
But more importantly, maybe it was the first RPG that ever had solitaire adventures. So in an era where you had to get a group of people around and you didn't have a lot of digital communication and whatnot, it could be a challenge getting everybody together. And so having a solitaire adventure was a way to actually enjoy a full-fledged RPG on your own as an alternative to group play. And even more importantly, it accentuated the narrative, the storytelling, right? That you were going through like a choose your own adventure book, but with a thin, powerful RPG engine of create a character, combat, saving rolls, accumulate loot and treasure, complete an adventure and survive, go on to the next one.
So you're basically working through these adventures that are printed, these little like comic book style adventures.
Exactly.
You're going through them, you're actually leveling up and getting gear and moving from one to the next and progressing a character.
Absolutely, and so some of the adventures are like the one that's here for demo, Naked Doom, is for first level brand new characters. Others are for super high level characters, right? And as you've gone through them, every character has their own path through these adventures. And it sort of got me thinking about the fact that, mobile gaming has exploded in recent years, but it's utterly devoid of any quality storytelling, right?
Yeah.
It's just click, 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 and okay, that's got an audience, but for a lot of us gamers, story is important, narrative is important. We want to understand who the characters are and what their motivations are and things.
Sometimes the most important,
for
many of us.
It's always what tickled me as a gamer, right? And I have found myself sort of a little, disappointed at times by the shallow storytelling in a lot of these things. And so it really came up with this idea of, look, we could do something interesting on digital platforms to take what Tunnels and Trolls started 40 plus years ago and turn that into something that allowed for people to write their own stories. And this was the idea of now what becomes the MetaArcade Adventures platform, right? Tunnels and Trolls is the first game that we're bringing in, but the vision here is that anybody who can write a story can ultimately create and publish their own adventure on this platform.
Interesting. So MetaArcade is basically acting as a platform, and the first thing you've thrown into that platform is Tunnels and Trolls.
You got it. And so if you think about, as you sit down and try the demo, or as if you remember playing Tunnels and Trolls and pen and paper, or even just reading through an old choose your own adventure book, right?
Yeah.
You'd have art, you'd have story, you'd make choices, you'd flip to other pages. In terms of Tunnels and Trolls, you add into that, I'm rolling for combat, I'm rolling for saving rolls, sometimes I live, sometimes I die, sometimes I negotiate, sometimes I flee, right? All those things come together. Bringing that to the digital platform allowed us to start thinking about, well, how would we allow other people to write their own adventures?
Right.
And that was always an important part of Tunnels and Trolls, and so in order to do that, right, think in terms of like a web publishing content management system, right? I sit here and I type a paragraph, I can preview it, I can then publish it to the web. We're doing the same thing here. Imagine you're sitting down, you've got a story in your head, you're typing your narrative, we're able to help you track your storyline across different branches. Each time you finish up a room, okay, let me look at the art archive and pull in an image. Let me listen to the music archive, pull in some sound effects, pull in some audio, right? Add some monsters, some treasures, some traps, some lore, things like that. Compile that all together. Of course, we're going to take a look at it and make sure you weren't using plagiarism or hate speech or anything nasty like that.
Sure.
But assuming not, we can then publish it directly for you on the Apple App Store, Google Play, and Steam. And if people buy your adventure, you're going to get a good share of that revenue, just like on Steam Workshop. If you create something digitally, a hat in Team Fortress 2, Valve gives you 25% of the proceeds. But I think we can do a little better than that in terms of percentage-wise, because the narrative is really the thing we're focusing on.
Yeah.
We want anybody who has a story, and everybody does, right? Everybody here at GenCon has a character and a world and a universe they want to talk about, letting them write an adventure without any technical skills needed, without needing to be able to be an artist, without having to find an audio engineer, just put all that together into something fun and give it a shot.
Well, we've seen a ton of people demoing this out here at the booth. What has the reception been like?
It's been great. And I tell you what's interesting. On the one hand, you certainly have the people who grew up with Tunnels and Trolls or Choose Your Own Adventure, like, this is cool. Now I have something I can bring with me. It's portable. I can continue to level through it without having to have all the pen and paper around me, which is great when I want it, but I don't always have I'm not always rolling my dice on the train kind of thing, right? So that's great. But what's been really surprising to me is how much the kids are digging it, right?
Yeah.
And I told my wife this, I texted her, I'm like, hey, the kids are really enjoying this. She's like, haha, they can read, LOL, right? And I think why, right, is like, a lot of us grew up with this sort of stuff and we're familiar with it, but if, I think about my own kids now and as they play stuff on mobile, they've never seen storytelling, they've never seen narrative, they never choose their way through an adventure. And I've tried getting them into tabletop stuff at times, and it just hasn't stuck. But as soon as I showed them this on a little tablet, they were like, "Whoa!" and they were in. So that's been really gratifying to see that games like this, Tunnels and Trolls is a near and dear one to my heart. I've been playing it for 40 years, but you got to think about the dozens, if not hundreds, of games that have sort of that old school mentality bent, that haven't made a digital transition, and as a result, there's just generations of gamers who have never played them.
Just missing out.
This feels like something that could really do some big stuff for that side of the business.
Tell me, how did MetaArcade come about, right? So how did this thing start, and where do you guys see yourselves in the distant future?
Sure. Well, to be completely candid, right, it all began, I've been working in video games for a long time now, and most recently was with a developer called Motiga, based up in Bellevue, Washington, making a game called Gigantic for Xbox One and PC. And as a lot of the big AAA stuff I've worked on happens over time, this was another one where hundreds of developer hours, tens of millions of dollars, and kind of ran into trouble, right? And so it got me thinking about a couple things. One, there's a different way to do development now, right? Where you, like we are doing here, you put something together quickly in a prototype, you get it in front of consumers, and you feel how the gamer's responding. You get their feedback, and we've deliberately done that here at GenCon, because hey, this is the crowd, right? If anybody's going to respond well to Tunnels and Trolls, it's this GenCon crowd. And we're getting feedback from them on just things like, you'll see in the prototype there's some black and white art, some color art, all right? What do you prefer? Are the dice too fast or the dice too slow? Just trying to get some of that feedback as we go through it, with that idea of community-driven development being integral to the process. And the second thought on that was around the idea of, again, getting that narrative back in. And part of this was, as things were quiet for me over the holiday, I spent a lot of time in the Commonwealth and Fallout 4, and I'm sure I'm not the only one here at GenCon who did that. And it just got me thinking about the fact that, I love the art, I love the graphics, but I really love the story. That's just really what RPGs are all about for me. And again, you don't find enough of that in mobile. And so that idea was kind of that confluence of, let's get some storytelling going on mobile platforms. Let's do it with some old school games that have, raw primal fantasy that people haven't experienced recently. It all just sort of came together, and then it was like, all right, GenCon's coming up fast, let's get a prototype done.
Beautiful.
Built it in Unity, it's running on iOS, Android, PC, and Mac. What you see in the demo here is 12 weeks of work, and we got ways to go, but it's off to a real good start.
Made it happen. And so what is the grand, where is MetaArcade in 20 years in the perfect future for you?
20 years, boy, I'm lucky if I could think 2 months ahead. But I would say this, right? Look, I think with Tunnels and Trolls and with this Adventures platform, I would like to see lots and lots of people trying their hand at publishing, right? And everybody's got a story, everybody's got an idea of what a world that they would like to build. Well, here's a chance to give it a shot, right? And if you put something together and you publish it and people like it, you're going to get some money on it. But maybe more importantly, it's your IP, your intellectual property. We have no claim on it. It's not like you're working with some publisher, which happens often in video games, where a developer has an idea and the publisher funds it and then they own it, right? No, you still own your IP. And so if you get some success out of this and you're feeling good about it, and you want to go write your screenplay or make your action figures or what have you, that's yours to do. We're just here to sell your adventures and help you find an audience. But beyond that, you own your intellectual property. And so when I look out a little bit, I would love to see the idea that there are people who are making a living writing adventures and doing that in the same way that, look, before Twitch, you could be a streamer, right? But it was pretty tricky. And Twitch made it something where now anybody's got an internet connection can stream. And if you've got a webcam in your camera, you can be on stream as you're doing that, right? And now there are people who make a living being Twitch streamers. There are people who make a living being WordPress bloggers, right? Why can't people make a living writing adventures if they're good enough at it? And they won't all be Stephen King, but maybe someone will be able to avoid having to get a real job and working 9 to 5 or being a barista in their spare time to fund that. Maybe this can be something that enables people to live a creative-driven life and career, as opposed to having to go work in what we classically call jobs that we do to pay bills. Maybe you can do that and follow your passion. That's what I'd love to see MetaArcade doing, is letting people do that for a living.
Well, David, that sounds absolutely fantastic.
Great,
thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
This is David with MetaArcade. Check them out. Sounds like a fascinating project and a huge future for these guys coming up. We got more coming from GenCon 2016, so stay tuned.